Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted that you're here with us today. Please be sure to connect with us on social media. Facebook.com/Reading with Your Kids. Reading with Your Kids on Instagram and @JedleyMagic on Twitter. Our guest today is Susan Lewis Solomont. She is telling us all about Stella The Ambassadog. I'm here in the studio with Augie the Wonder Dog, and he is so excited to hear about Stella the Ambassadog. But before we can invite Susan in, we need to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by the last surviving dinosaur, the Tyrannosaurus, written by Stephen Joseph. You know, at this time, we're publishing this in the middle of April. We've been under lockdown, quarantine, whatever you want to call it, for about 3 or 4 weeks here in Boston. We're all looking for some diversion, looking for some fun. Well, I have it. This is an amazing book that is so much fun to read aloud. The Last Surviving Dinosaur, the Tyrannosaurus, written by Stephen Joseph and playfully illustrated by Andy Case. This book tells the tale of how the dinosaurs became extinct. And we're not talking about that life-ending meteor shower thing the paleontologists are often talking about. The Tyrannosaurus is so cranky that she makes all the other bigger and meaner dinosaurs disappear. That is, until she comes across the only dinosaur who is immune to her incessant complaining, the Tyrannosaurus. These two dinosaurs evolved into humans, and that's where cranky people come from. You know, the best part of this book is that it's not just for cranky kids. As the storyteller explains, even mommy and daddy can be a Tyrannosaurus and a Kvetchosaurus sometimes. The Last Surviving Dinosaur reminds readers to be mindful of when and how often they complain, a lesson from which all readers, young and old, can benefit. The Last Surviving Dinosaur, the Tyrannosaurus, is available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and many other sites where books are sold. Joining us on the line from right outside of Boston in Massachusetts, we are really excited to speak to the author of Stella The Ambassadog. Please welcome to the show, Susan Lewis Solomont. Susan, how are you?
Good morning, Jed, or good afternoon, all of the above. It's great to be on your show. So happy to be here, and I love talking about Stella the Ambassadog.
I am really excited about this, too. Now, as I understand it, Stella was the ambassador to the beautiful kingdom of Spain, or the country of Spain.
Stella was the ambassador to the country of Spain. She got to serve the United States in this capacity for 3.5 years. And I have to say she wasn't sure what she was getting into, but she rose to the occasion and could not wait to tell young children and school-age children all about her adventures.
This is amazing. You know, you mentioned that Stella didn't know what she was getting into. I bet you there's a lot of folks out there who are listening who may have heard the term ambassador before, but don't really know what that means, and certainly are not familiar with the term ambassador. Can you kind of elaborate on what those roles are?
Sure can. So to put this in to order, Stella, an ambassador is the representative from one country to the other. And in our case, it's the representative. In our case, it was President Obama, who actually asked my husband to be his ambassador to Spain. And we said yes to that immediately. And we served our country. My husband was the ambassador to Spain from 2010 to 2013. The ambassadog is something we created. And that is because Stella, our real dog, Stella Blu, who's a cockapoo, was then 7 years old. She had to learn how to be an ambassador, how to serve her country and how to make friends and learn about a new culture and do things that would enhance relationships between the two countries. And the real Stella did an outstanding job of doing so. And she got to be known, she was widely known in Madrid where she lived and where this book takes place.
That's really thrilling. You know, you mentioned something that I used to hear when I was younger. I don't know if kids still hear it these days. You know, when you're traveling, when you're going to another country, you're representing your country to those people. You may be the only American that a person in Madrid or a small village in Spain or some other country may ever meet, and their impression of our country may be based a lot on their interaction with you.
You are so accurate. And I think that's something I, as a human being, as opposed to Stella the dog, realized early on. And we're trained in that. Our State Department teaches you. You are the face of the United States, and you are there to represent the best in our values, both political, economic, and cultural values, and to create as many bridges as you can. And I also want to say it's hard work. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of people think you're drinking tea all day long and holding little salons. No, you work very hard to make sure you're representing the country and building the bridges that you need to build. And it's one of the things I wanted to teach in the book is that even a dog, or as we humanize the dog, got to do that, got to make friends, got to understand the culture. And one of the things Stella loved in Spain was the food. So, I chose something. She didn't make a lot of political friendships. She did not help the economy like a real ambassador would. But she did other things that could show young readers that diplomacy has its way of creating bonds with people in other countries. Maybe similar to how pen pals used to work, where you learn about each other.
Yeah, and that's something well, we've lost the pen pal on that. You know, folks, I know kids who don't know how to mail a letter.
I do too. Remember, we had to learn where to put the address in the upper left-hand corner.
Yes, and where to put the stamp. And I actually had an interaction. I was at a Staples once, and I bought a big, box full of 500 envelopes, and the young person at the checkout desk just looked at me and said, I can't imagine ever needing more than 5 or 10 envelopes in my entire life.
Well, it's a sad truth. We don't use them anymore, and actually, young people aren't even emailing anymore. They want to text everyone or chat, whatever they might do. But I felt it was important that Stella also showed some of the human sides of things that children can relate to, and that is moving to a new place. Mm-hmm. She saw her things packed up and did not know where she'd be going to. She got to a new country, and they spoke a language she did not understand. And she would look up at people in big brown eyes and just stare, as she learned to adapt. And I think that's something young people can relate to. Those that move to a new place, they travel around. Life is not just, the house you live in forever for some people. So I wanted to show that. And the real ambassadors serve for somewhere around 3 years, and then they move again. And I wanted to show that in the book, that's going to be part of her life. Just when she was happy and meeting people and loving everything she was doing, she had to get up and do it again. Yeah. So, I wanted that human side of Stella to really show.
Well, you make some good points because, again, things are so much different than they were for, I guess, a majority of kids. I know growing up, we lived in the same neighborhood that my grandparents that my father grew up in, and that my grandparents lived in for an awful long time, went to the same school. But it's different for kids these days. Even kids who might live in the same community, they're moving from a daycare center to a kindergarten to an elementary school to an intermediate school to a middle school and different dance clubs and different soccer teams. So they're making a lot more transitions these days. And I don't think the parents often understand how different and challenging that can be for kids.
I agree with you 100%. Kids are not as stationary as they used to be. They are moving around more, and there are more changes. And resilience is one of those qualities we really hope for in our children. And the positive side of something like that is it does make you resilient. It does make you open to new situations. In some cases, I don't mean to generalize, but I hope that in the book, Stella could show her emotion in that way and share it so that, it's okay to feel sad, and it's also okay to feel happy, and all, everything in between. I was really hoping to show in this. I also think one of the things that you made me think of is that we live in a more interconnected world now. Mm-hmm. We are not just our local community. We talk about things going on elsewhere. And in this book, I wanted to talk about a different culture. And Spain, even though we're all people and we all like to eat and go out and we want to exercise and be healthy and we work, I wanted to show that there are some differences that you need to learn about. So I'm hoping that this book can also teach children about making new friends and learning about people who have different cultures and backgrounds than you do. So it was fun to do it through the eyes of a wide open, adorable, perfect pet named Stella.
I'm really excited. We talk a lot on the show about what kind of conversations you can have while the family is reading a great book like Stella the Ambassadog together. And as we're talking, I'm imagining that this is a book that families are going to want to read over and over again because there are so many different conversations that we can have from reading Stella, talking about your emotions when you're moving and transitioning and those kind of challenges, talking about building bridges between people, talking about different cultures, talking about taking a trip to a place like Spain and what Spain's all about. So it just seems perfect, a perfect garden where gardens and conversations can grow.
Thank you. I think so. This is a chapter book, so it is really geared for ages 5 to 7. Mm-hmm. I also see it as a book not just that parents can read to children, but siblings can read to siblings as well. And it is divided into chapters where you could have one about exploring your neighborhood. Mm-hmm. You could have one about the city. There's one where Stella meets the royal family. So it does open up a lot of conversation that could happen with parents and children, caretakers and children, siblings and siblings, to have that. I'll also say, and I'll give a plug here, I think it's beautifully illustrated. And I worked with an organization out of the Boston community, a not-for-profit called Artists for Humanity, that teaches Boston City kids how to be artists. And one of their graduates, a young man named Gray Truong, was my illustrator in this. And we work closely together. He's very detail-oriented and beautifully done illustrations. But he also had to learn about some of the culture. So when Stella goes to the famous museum in Spain, the Prado, and looks at a painting by Velázquez, Gray Truong went and researched the painting so that he could figure it out. And in a very cute gesture, instead of having people in the painting, he put other little dogs in it. So they're beautiful. And I think that can stimulate conversations as well as this book is being read aloud.
That's wonderful. Now, one of the things you mentioned was that Stella loved the food that she encountered in Spain. What was her favorite food?
Her favorite food, hands down, is something called jamón ibérico, or Spanish ham, which comes off of a pig. And in one of the illustrations, you'll see pigs all over the place. But this is a very, very specially curated pig, and whenever we would serve it, she would hope it would drop on the floor and she would gobble it up. Because we really don't like to feed the real Stella human food, but the book Stella loved jamón ibérico. She did not like gazpacho, which is a Spanish cold tomato soup. That wasn't her favorite, and she did not want it in her bowl. But jamón ibérico and queso, the cheeses, she liked those too.
That's awesome. That's. What about paella? Was she a fan of paella by any chance?
She liked paella. Paella, the rice dish that's baked in this big, cooking pan. She liked that, and it would have fish in it often and vegetables, which as much as we tried to keep her away from, even though we want children to eat healthy things like that, Stella would find her way to the paella. She loves Spanish food, and there's one episode in the book where it's Thanksgiving, and she gets to see again what an American Thanksgiving looks like with the turkey and all the trimmings on it. So she got some American food as well as just Spanish food.
I have to ask, what was it like when you were asked, when your family, because your husband was the ambassador, but your family actually served. When your family was asked by President Obama to serve in this capacity, what was that like?
It's such a complicated answer. I can picture the day perfectly when the call came in, and my husband's, he was jubilant. He was so excited and so happy, as was I. But I have to say fear set in for me. I was leaving my home, my neighborhood, my community, my work, my friends, my family. My daughters were grown and they did not come with us. So there was a lot of anxiety about picking up and moving to another country for 3.5 years. And, we went through a range of emotions. For those who are interested, I also wrote a book called Lost and Found in Spain, Tales of an Ambassador's Wife, which is my own personal memoir as well as a travel log on our adventures. I came to love it. I came to be so deeply moved that I got to serve our country and I got to know the wonderful people and country of Spain. It is a second home to us. We go back often. Stella doesn't get to go back that often. It's not that easy to travel internationally with a dog, and we worry about that. So she stays home these days, and that's actually a sadness because so many people loved her, and she loved them. She got to know a lot of people and a lot of places in Spain. Yeah. So anyway, my own book tells a lot about my own journey from being somewhat lost to being super found.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, I want to talk a little bit. You had mentioned before we started talking about the difference between a career diplomat and what you and your family, how you and your family served.
That's correct. So we are fortunate in our country to have a wonderful State Department, which has foreign service officers. They're people who plan their career to represent the United States through diplomacy. Similar to the military in serving, they move from place to place, and we have a wonderful diplomatic foreign service corps. And those that start, on the ladder to success ultimately can become ambassadors. That's one route our country has. Another is what we call non-career ambassadors. And my husband, Alan, was a non-career. He had a successful career, had been involved in a lot of presidential elections, especially helping to elect President Obama. And a non-career ambassador brings other skills and talents to the position that are different. They've had real experience in the world of business, in finance, in healthcare, in the cultural world, and they bring those skills and talents to the position as well. And our country is judicious about where career versus non-career ambassadors go. And I would say for the most part, non-career ambassadors serve our country beautifully, as do career ambassadors. We're very blessed to be that we got to serve, be part of our country's democracy, and got to know many people within the Foreign Service who serve under the ambassador. They're still our dear friends.
Now, I imagine that selecting an ambassador for Spain, that person would be different than the person who would be the ideal ambassador to China or Vietnam or Thailand, or can they be just moved around without kind of consideration?
It varies. It varies. So I would say to places like Pakistan or some of the more, Iran, Iraq, really get career ambassadors whose service has come up through a deep study of that nation. But when we were in Spain, for example, people would say, why Spain? And we really didn't know what the connection was, except that somebody had the foresight to say, Susan and Alan Solomont are going to love Spain and Spain is going to love them back, which happened. But our colleagues in other countries, the ambassador who went to Germany had lived in Germany and had opened up one of the large financial service companies there. The ambassador who lived in Italy at our time grew up in Italy during the time when his father was administering the Marshall Plan. And I can give a lot of examples like that where there's a rhyme or a reason for an ambassador to be placed in a certain country. But there are what's called these hardship posts, which are much more difficult and probably have much more military focus or, in this sad, troubled world, terrorism and things like that, which would be better served by somebody who had been a career ambassador. And again, it's why I said we're judicious. We're smart about where we place people. And it's generally worked out. Alan would not have really been the right person for Pakistan, for example, but he was perfect for Spain.
Now, you mentioned a couple of times that, Stella had duties, and she went out and she met people. What kind of duties did Stella have as the ambassador?
Well, Stella was a greeter. She would make friends with people wherever she went. In the fictionalized version here, for example, when Stella goes to the royal palace to meet the king and queen of Spain, like any puppy, she wanted to misbehave and run off. But when she ran off, she ended up finding the king's dog, who's named Paco. And Stella and Paco become friends. And Stella watches behavior that Paco does. For example, Paco jumps up on the furniture in the palace. And Stella knows we don't do that, but she sort of wonders. So she's learning different things about it. Stella goes, as I said, to the museum. She goes to meet the president of the countries when they get together. So she gets to observe what's going on and use her sensitivity and friendliness to become part of the global journey she's on.
That's thrilling. I'm wondering, did Stella get to meet President Obama?
The real Stella did meet President Obama, and that was when President Obama came to our real house in the country, and we have a great picture of President Obama. I'll send it to you. It'll be great on the blog, holding Stella. But when we were in Spain, Stella did not meet the president. She did meet Vice President Biden, and he liked her a lot, and she also met Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. She met many of the people within the cabinet, many congressmen and women, and many senators along. So Stella is a very friendly dog who likes to be around people. She doesn't like to give speeches, which the people do in diplomatic life, but she listens and she knows that she's not supposed to make noise when someone's giving a speech.
Good for
Stella. Very
well
behaved most of the time.
I'm wondering, as we're about to wrap up, what advice can you give to kids? Because we talked about the fact that as we go out, as we travel, we are representing our country, we're representing our state, we're representing our city, we're representing our school and our family, we're meeting different people. What's the best way that we can be the very best ambassadors for our country, for our families, for our schools?
I love this question. I think that you realize that you are representing your country when you travel someplace. You're representing your state. You're representing your neighborhood. So yes, your behavior matters. Also, your curiosity. Be curious about where you're going. Ask questions. Learn about people. Learn about places. Learn about history. Learn about the environment that you're going to be in. And a puppy is very curious, and that's why Stella became such a great ambassadog. And I would encourage all the young children and boys and girls as they travel to keep their curiosity going, learn and soak it in, and experience each adventure as fully as you can.
You know, I love that, and as you were talking, I remember growing up and seeing something that was different, a person from a different culture, and hearing my parents say to me, don't ask questions, don't stare, don't...
But now, you know, when you hear a name now, and I always say to somebody when I can't pronounce a name, can you repeat that for me so I can learn how to say it and learn, oh, where are you from? Oh, that is interesting. So I probably had the same parents you had, but now I think it's time for all the parents to tell their kids, be curious. Yes. Keep your curiosity wide open.
Yeah, and there is a way to express your curiosity that is that people love and will embrace. And
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
I just love that. Susan, I know that people are going to want to get to know more about Stella the Ambassadog and also check out your book for adults. Where can people go online to connect with you and to find out about your work?
Well, first of all, you can always buy books at any of the online sellers like Amazon and you know, Barnes and Noble and so on. Just search for Stella the Ambassadog or Susan Lewis Solomont or Lost and Found in Spain. But also go to your local independent bookstores. It's really important that we support these community treasures. And I know that I was in my local bookstore yesterday. They had 10 copies of Stella the Ambassadog. I was so happy to see it there. And my publisher, Disruption Books, also sells both my books. And for those that want, there's also a little mini Stella plush toy available at Disruption Books, which I have not seen. They are the cutest things in the world, and I think everybody should have one. So online, Amazon, independent bookstores, or disruptionbooks.com.
That's awesome. We've had such a great time learning about the duties of an ambassador and an ambassadog, and we've had such a great time learning about Stella the Ambassadog from the author of the book, Susan Lewis Solomont. Susan, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Jed. My pleasure. And thanks to all your listeners. Appreciate it.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Maram Taiba. She is coming in here. We have a fascinating conversation about kids literature and also about her book, Weather Nose. That's the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Hey, if you're the author of a children's book, you may be kind of frustrated right now. I mean, the typical ways that children's authors market their book is to get out there and meet kids and let kids know all about it. That means getting into schools. Well, you can't do that right now because schools are closed. It might be doing book signings at a bookstore. Well, that's not an option because bookstores are closed. It might be going to a library to do a live reading. Well, that's not an option either because libraries are closed. The one thing that is open is the Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program. We have a panel of great evaluators, and if they believe that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a certified great read. And with that status comes all sorts of wonderful tools that you can use now and throughout the year that can help separate your books from all of the other books that are published every single month. You can go to our website to find out more. It's readingwithyourkids.com. There's a button at the top of the page called Author Services. Click on that button, and it'll tell you everything you need to know about this really, really beneficial program, the Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program. We want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. Of course, we want to thank our wonderful guest, Susan Lewis Solomont. Be sure to check out Stella The Ambassadog. I also want to thank my amazing team, of course, my amazing producer, Fatima Khan, my awesome author, Ambassador Peggy Cotto. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. And most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so very much for taking the time to join us today. Thank you so very, very much for being your kid's teacher, your kid's coach, your kid's everything right now. It's a really, really stressful time. We really appreciate all the challenges that we're facing, and thankfully we're all facing them together, giving each other support. And this will end. It will end, and we will be back out at schools and live shows and signings and spending time with our family and friends. And before you know it, we will be back together. Until then, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us today. Thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.